for understandable reasons, is what on God's green earth can I do? And for those of you who know me at this point, you know that when I say on God's green earth, that is because I really try not to curse. And that's the phrase that I've come up with. Privately, I don't use that phrase. I use other phrases. So that's a question I get, which is, what can I do? I have answered that question in two prior posts. I'm going to follow this conversation with those two posts so that you have it in one spot. Some ideas I have that are for your consideration as to what you can do, depending obviously on your interests and your beliefs and the level of activism that you want to engage in. Also, following this, there are some links that we will put in this post of resources. So, for instance, if you are looking for the name of politicians who represent you or in your area, there is a link that can help you do that. So I hope you find that really useful, and this is more information for you with some ideas about what to do. I can just tell you one thing that I do. I'm a huge fan of Just Security, which is a legal forum that is affiliated with the NYU, but there are many people who participate in all sorts of academic institutions, and it is just a wonderful, wonderful resource. They're really smart articles. I don't agree with everything that everyone writes, but I'm always really, I really learn a lot from reading it, and it makes me smarter. And it sharpens my thinking about issues. There also is a really terrific tracker because there's so many lawsuits now post January 20th with respect to things that various legal entities and people think are improper. And there's a tracker that keeps track of what's going on, but it's grouped by subject matter so that it's not just alphabetical and you have to sort of figure out, what do I need to look at? And that's both a great way to see what's going on, but as I mentioned, it's also a great way to see what you might want to be involved in and get involved in. And you can see what groups are doing the most or doing something that you find particularly interesting, because you can find out more about them from their website. You can obviously financially donate if you have the wherewithal and interest. So there are all sorts of ways to be involved. And I hope that this is at least one useful resource for you.
What can everyday citizens do to make a difference?
Love that question. And that's the question I get the most. So there's a lot. So I do think it's really important to remember the state and local level. Get involved in, political and charitable organizations, local community organizations. At the national level, it is really important to remember, if you are politically active, to work on House seats, not just Senate seats, so that we're not in a situation where one party, whether it's Democrats or Republicans, controls all sort of levers of government, which appears to be what we have now, but for the judiciary. The other is make sure you call your congressmen and women, your senators, the people in the House of Representatives, call them, email them, send them letters. They're very attuned to what gets attention and what doesn't get attention. And so, if you're exasperated or angry or upset about particular issues, you should let people know and be heard. People really focus on that issue. Finally, for those of you who can afford it, you should give to various candidates who you support. You can give to advocacy groups that are conducting work that you think is important. And also see if they go to their website, see if they need volunteers to help. I have lots and lots of people who, over the last few days, who are lawyers who have asked me, how can I get involved? And I send them to various groups. So if you're in that category, you should feel free to let me know, and I can help steer you to ways that you can try and make sure your voice is heard. After all, remember, this is a democracy. Your voice is really important. And you may think that people aren't listening right now, but they do. They want to see, are we asleep at the wheel? Or are we engaged? And it's really important, if you care about this country as I do, to be engaged.
And I think I'm going to start with what I think is my favorite question. No offense to the other hundreds of people who submitted questions, but here's the question. What can the everyday old lady do to save our democracy? That is a great question. So last week, I gave lots of suggestions because I frequently get the most common question I get is, what can I do? And since last week, I actually thought of something else that I wanted to convey to you. It's obviously totally voluntary. This is just a suggestion. But one of the things you can do is there are innumerable lawsuits that have been filed since January 20th. Challenging what the president and various people in his administration have done. And those lawsuits are pending. I keep on making a plug for, if you want to track those, a legal forum that's called Just Security. And I'm putting in the chat in our Substack the link to that litigation tracker. So you can see all of the different litigations that are pending. Also, Mayor McCord and I talk about them in our podcast, Main Justice. So that's another way to stay on top of what's going on. But to return to the question of what can somebody do, if any of those lawsuits you think are really meritorious and you want to support what's going on there, if you go to the very last page and you see who's signing, who are the plaintiffs' counsel, a lot of them are brought by advocacy groups, such as Mary works with a group called ICAP, that is connected to Georgetown Law School. I'm not making a specific request with respect to ICAP, but ICAP is an example. The American Civil Liberties Union would be another example. But one of the things you can do is look at those lawsuits, look at the last page to who's bringing them. And a lot of these are brought by advocacy groups where your own interests may align with what they're doing. And go to their website, read more about them, but there always are going to be donation pages, and you can donate. You can also see if there's volunteer work in connection with those groups. But that, I was trying to think of other things that people could do, and that is definitely something that if it's of interest to you, I would definitely check